I think that today much has been said about violence against women, but we all agree that it is a worldwide scourge that has to be fought. Women's rights have to be respected and protected without any kind of discrimination. We respect people's diversity and multicultural environment and experiences. As UNESCO's Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity affirms, cultural diversity is a source of exchange, innovation, and creativity necessary for humankind. In this sense, it is the common heritage of humanity and one of the roots of development, and also a means to achieve a more satisfactory intellectual, emotional, moral, and spiritual existence. However, cultural relativism cannot be an excuse for women's discrimination. In my practical experience, I have unfortunately encountered various forms of violence against women, like the one perpetrators against widows, at least in Africa. We have a protocol on human rights in Africa, adopted in 2005. We called also Maputo Protocol, which provides 3 fundamental rights to widows. Widows not to be subject to inhuman, humiliating, or degrading treatment. Second, to automatically become the guardian and custodian of her children after the death of her husband, unless this is contrary to the interests of the welfare of the children. Widows have the right to remarry and marry the person of her choice, because in some traditions and customs, widowhood is too often associated with painful and humiliating rites and practices. Sometimes widows are considered the primary suspect of their husband's killing, accused of sorcery. In several cases, they receive severe punishments, like losing the guardianship of their children, their homes, their possessions or status for crimes they did not commit. Odd methods, not scientifically proved, are used to test their goodwill. Baskets can be thrown into a river. If they don't follow the water's current, the woman is considered guilty. Or sometimes they have to wash their dead husbands alone or sleep alone in her house with the deceased. Based on my experience in Africa, this is another point. I finish with this. I can assume that the official recognition of governments of the existence of violence against women began during the 19th only. Before that moment, violence against women was a private matter occurring in between walls, where no one was concerned besides the victim and the perpetrator. Generally speaking, when the issue first appeared in legal texts, it was due to the important attention it was gained, not because it was truly considered that violence against women is a violation of fundamental women's human rights. But this scenario has changed, and the instruments of regional, national, international law recognize that violence against women is a public matter. I think Caroline says this afternoon the same thing. I would like to say, just for reference, that we have the first convention at regional level to raise the matter of violence against women and to set up provisions on specific provisions of violence against women is the Inter-American Convention on the Prevention, Punishment, and Eradication of Violence Against Women, known as Convenção de Berlim para o Brasil, adopted in 1994. We have also, as I said previously, the Maputo Protocol. On its Article 4, they have a reference on violence against women. Also, we have this afternoon the Istanbul Convention. I think it's the advantage document, which protects various forms of violence, such as medical and scientific experiments on women without their informed consent, women trafficking, harmful practices, female genital mutilation, for example, and women in armed conflict, etc. During my mandates as a special rapporteur on women's rights, I evidenced that there were some countries with the legislation on women's rights, or at least constitutional principles on gender equality. But very few had specific legislation on violence against women, and violence prevention and action plans were even rarer. This specific legislation is an Herculean effort from the women's movements in Africa. These movements cannot be ignored or underappreciated. They represent in the world and in Africa an enormous work. In Africa, they included men in the discussions, and they tried to speak the same language, and they worked through lobbying and targeting the heads of states. In a lot of countries, I recognize that women, including those in suburbs areas or rural areas, only acknowledge their rights because of these movements. At the beginning of the 21st century, we could think that the objectives of women's combats were attained, since contemporary democracies have been making efforts to change the laws towards equality of rights and against gender discrimination. However, the improvements concerning rural areas and girls' rights remain slow and uneven. In my personal experience, I first thought that violence was related to a country's social and economic development. I can now affirm that development level can help achieving women's rights, but there is no necessary direct relation between them. In some developed countries, the violence level diminishes and then grows again. The first conclusion I reached was that not being a developed country can help to create conditions to fight violence. But we cannot rely its causes on the development excuse. Educated and successful women has less risk because they usually know their rights, but there's still psychological aspects, the dependence from men. This is a problem we must solve. The second conclusion I formulate because of my African experience on promoting women's rights is that we have to transform men, but also we have to transform ourselves. Why I'm saying this? We should recognize and speak out that on our capacity, on our talent, as equal of men. Some of us feel that we are not capable. Some of us, I don't want to say all, but we are able to do things and innovative ways to deliver speeches, as I'm doing now, to do anything we want. As I try to demonstrate, there is a progress, but there's still a huge problem of practices. As this current conference on violence against women has highlighted us, there are still various forms of violence against women to operate as custom, religion, or tradition. So, how can we shrink the distance between policy and practice? How do we change mentalities? There is an exit. If it seems so hard to go from principles to actions, it is because, first of all, we need this commitment translated into plans of action by policymakers, governments. It is difficult because this transition demands methodologies. It faces success and partial failure, moments of enthusiasm and doubt. For changing, it is first of all necessary to have a strong political will. It is impossible to change something that is passive or resigned. But although willing is a necessary first impulse, it is alone insufficient. A changing path needs to affect our representations, transforming the little non-adapted images and concepts in people's heads into more sensible and positive ones. Changing representations can help deconstruct stereotypes and stigmas. It requires method, rhythms, and routines that little by little become something natural, transform the norm. The theoretical part is important, and ideas have to be regularly polished in order to advance the debates, but it's vital that concrete action are taken. So,